Stephen Prina is an artist who has been making work and has been a practicing artist for 30 years. He's an important member of a post-conceptualist group that came out of LA and has influenced generations of younger artists as a teacher and as an important voice in the contemporary art world in California, but around the world. His practice, like Sean's, but of course in very different ways, is varied. Stephen makes films and painting and sound installations and photographs. But at the same time, over the course of these 30 years, while he's been a practicing artist, he has also had a separate but very acclaimed and rich career as a musician, as a pop musician and as a composer. He has played with the band The Red Crayola, has produced his own pop albums, and has played with orchestras across the world. Only until recently has Stephen begun to synthesize these two endeavors, that is, his art practice and his musical pursuits. And in this show, Modern Movie Pop, he brings those two interests together. In the galleries, we're showing a suite of new and recent work that spans installation and watercolors and photography and painting throughout the performance gallery, which I'm standing in. Stephen has recently begun painting monochromes on tall window blinds that will be suspended from the ceiling here, literally festooning the space and this stage, which I'm standing on, which is an appropriate venue for Stephen's exhibition, which in March, in just a couple of months, will play host to the world premiere of Stephen's newest and most complex musical score to date, Concerto for Modern Movie and Pop Music for 10 instruments and voice. Both this composition and the exhibition are deeply rooted in a number of networks and influences, and this is a very important element of Stephen's practice, whereby for every one of his projects he invests himself deeply in a kind of complex web of histories, both personal history, history of his own past projects, contemporary art history, cultural history, musical history, and explores the way that those influences come together in new work. In the galleries, there will be, in this final gallery, the doorway which you see behind me, will feature his newest listening lounge, which will be a video installation, his white room, called The Way He Always Wanted It. And this will be Stephen's first video installation in 30 years. He makes films, but is very careful only to screen them in theaters, where we'll be showing 2 of those films in March also. The film here draws from, the video installation, that is, draws from outtakes from one of these films, and will be an immersive experience. And alongside it will also be other works, the watercolors and photographs, which cull from outtakes from this film he's made, also slogans from his past projects, images painted from his balcony in Los Angeles. But much of the work in the exhibition references a particular film that Stephen made in 2008, the subject of which was the modernist architect Bruce Goff, who was an iconoclastic and extraordinary architect who had an under-recognized career early on as an artist and composer also. This in part is where Stephen's interest comes from. He made a film set in Goff's house outside Chicago. From this film, he's taken images that then become part of new projects featured here in this exhibition. The soundtrack of this film or excerpts or fragments from the soundtrack of this film will become a part of his new concerto that will also include excerpts from his own Prina's past pop songs, his other film soundtracks, and will be structured on the modern composer Anton Webern's concerto for 9 instruments, Opus 24. So again, with all of his projects, they're all deeply rooted to a network of varied histories that he brings together. The concerto, we're so pleased to premiere here, working with distinguished musicians from the symphony and elsewhere in St. Louis. We premiered the concerto here where I'm standing with these musicians, a conductor, and Stephen on guitar and vocals. It will be it's an opus, really, an extraordinary performance of an artist who has decided to bring these two pursuits together for the first time. A key element of Prina's entire oeuvre, really, and especially for this show, is this notion of the reprise or reprisal, which in music signifies a further performance, repetition of a passage or an entire song, often slightly altered to different effect. And this becomes key for Stephen, who's invested in appropriation, as I said, in rooting himself to these histories and influences, bringing those back in his work, allowing traces of past projects to resurface in new artworks. This notion of reprisal comes to play here, where he is essentially quoting himself and others in these new projects to add a new voice or a different tenor to what he's producing. Of course, this comes to play in his concerto, which reprises his own music, his pop songs and covers. Joni Mitchell is an artist he's often covered, and his film soundtracks, but also reprising Anton Webern's structure, taking it to a kind of structural level. And then in his artwork, reprisal comes to play where in the quotation of actual slogans or linguistic motifs, such as in the watercolors where you see his initials or fragments of phrases that have characterized past projects, such as "it was the best he could do at the moment." And in the video installation and in the photographs you see in the show, those images of the snowy landscape that looks out onto a highway are outtakes from a film he made in 2008. So again, you have really throughout the work and throughout his practice this notion of not only of appropriation, because it's not simply borrowing images, but of reprisal and of quotation to change the tenor of the object or the image.